on all my other channels. Maybe that's why we're not getting people watching. So anyway, okay, so now we are live on all of the channels. I forgot to turn them on everywhere else. But now we're up and running. So welcome into the show tonight. And we're going to be here for the next hour or so, maybe a little bit longer. And again, if you have any questions, if there's anything you're wondering about, anything you want to chat about, leave it in the chat and I will get to it. But back to this bill. Representative Jefferson Burton has introduced a bill, HB 479. It came out on Wednesday. And what it does is it guts the state's vote-by-mail system. He tried to do this last year, but there was a lot of pushback from the public. There was a lot of pushback from election officials. What this bill does is every voter will get a ballot in the mail. So ballots will be sent to you in the mail. And but unfortunately, you're not able to drop it in the mail to send it back. You will have to take these ballots to a drop box. And as I said before, the drop box is going to be staffed by election workers who will check you against the voter rolls, and then they will check your ID. And it also tightens up which ID is acceptable for turning in a ballot. And so Utah used to be a universal vote-by-mail state. That increased turnout across the board. Turnout was incredible across the board. If you look at the jump in participation, we went vote-by-mail in like 2018, but we fully implemented vote-by-mail for the 2020 election, which was the pandemic year, but turnout was orders of magnitude higher. And we're getting rid of that. And it's just, it's a way to require ID at the ballot box without calling it checking your ID at the ballot box. And I mean, I don't have a problem with asking people for ID at the ballot box, but there are some critics who will say that this is a way to disenfranchise people. This is a way to reduce people participating. Okay, hang on. We're going to do this here. Come here. This is the Schnauzer. The Schnauzer joins the chat. Here we go. This is Moose. This is Moose. Everybody say hello to Moose. Moose is here. Oh, he's being shy. Let me pull him over closer to the camera. There we go. There we go. That's Moose. He's kind of hangs out in my office every once in a while. But this is Moose. So, anyway, Moose has now been there. All right, so Crystal on TikTok says, wait, when would ballot drop-offs be open then? According to the bill, you can start dropping off your ballots 5 days before the election between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. But the boxes have to be staffed during that time. And then on election day, they would also be open 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. So that's when you have to drop off your ballots. It wouldn't be for this election. It wouldn't be in effect for this election. It would be in effect for the 2027 and 2028 elections. If this passes, and it feels like it's probably going to pass. So, that's what this bill does. You have to drop your ballot off in person at a ballot box. Other comment, it says here, they also spent so much of our tax dollars to get addresses in tribal and rural areas so we could increase participation. This dismantling of everything is so frustrating. Now, there are some exceptions for who can mail. There are some exceptions. People who are ill, sick, have trouble leaving the house. But the problem is, in order to get that exception, you have to go down to the county clerk in person and fill out a form and show ID then. So they're going to be checking your ID at some point during the process. The only people who that is not in effect for are overseas voters, military voters, and overseas is usually Mormon missionaries. Their ID standards are relaxed a little bit when returning their ballots by mail. But there would be no ability for, like if I was going to drop off my ballot, I could not take my wife's because she would have to be there to show her ID. That's what's at the center of this bill. Someone said included prohibiting collection of ballots for a group of voters, vote restriction of homebound. Yes, you would not be able to collect ballots and drop them off for other people because there has to be ID in the process. You either get an exemption so you can mail your ballot back, but you have to go down to the county clerks and show your ID, or you would have to go to the ballot box or a polling place. On election day, it'll also be at the polling places and show your ID there. This bill is from Representative Jefferson Burton. He tried to do this last year. He had almost exactly the same bill last year. And it got through a House committee in this form, but then it was changed on the House floor. There was a compromise between the lieutenant governor's office. There was a lot of pushback from voters, so he stripped this out of the bill. He did still make some changes to elections. Now, ballots have to be received on election by the close of the polls. They have to be there by the close of the polls when you mail them back. That's one of the things that I believe this bill did last year, but they stripped this out. But now it's back this year, and it looks like we are going to be stripping out or ending vote by mail in Utah. There won't be any more of that. You will get your ballots in the mail, but you have to return them at a ballot box. It does set a floor for how many ballot boxes must be available. So if a municipality has fewer than 10,000 active voters, that's one ballot box. Larger municipalities have to have at least 2 ballot boxes, plus one more for every 10,000 active voters, and they have to be distributed around the municipality or the county or whatever. So they do set a floor on that. Ballot boxes must be staffed by workers from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. On each of the 5 business days before and on election day. And as I said before, you're not able to put your own ballot in the box. You have to hand your ballot in the envelope to the poll worker, who will then check you against the voter rolls and then check your ID, and then they will place it in the ballot box. So essentially every voter has to show up in person, either at the ballot box or at the polling place on election day. No more dropping off the ballots for everyone else in your household or other people. There's one other thing it does, and it's interesting. It's kind of a minor part, but it makes some changes to financial disclosures. When a candidate files for office, they have to put a financial disclosure on the lieutenant governor's website, and their address is available on that. Now, they can always choose to have like a P.O. box or something, but going forward, any email address, any phone number, any address must be redacted by the lieutenant governor's office before it's put online, before it's put on the disclosure website. So that's what we are. That's the big election bill this year. We've talked before on how they're going to make your voter information more available to people. Right now, when you register to vote, you can elect to have your information marked as private, which means it can't be disclosed to anyone in the public. It can't be some political parties can get it for campaigning purposes, but it's redacted from the public. No one can see that. And that came about a number of years ago, I think back in 2010, somebody went and bought the voter file from the elections office. Anybody can buy the voter file. It's like $1,000 to buy it. And they went and bought the voter file, and then they posted the whole thing online. Everybody's name, everybody's address, their voting history, their political party. And it was Senator Karen Maine who spearheaded this push to make it so to make it so that people could have their information not disclosed publicly through a private record. Well, we're going to be fixing that. And part of the reason why, one of the reasons Phil Lyman is convinced that the 2020 election was stolen. Okay. This is his conspiracy theory. After the 2020 election, he and his merry band of conspiracy theorists tried to conduct an audit of the election. And so what do? They get the voter rolls. And people have taken their information and withheld it. They marked it as private. And so, not understanding that part of it, Phil and his supporters would say there are precincts with more votes than voters, not understanding that people are withholding their information. They made their information private. But that sort of fueling this conspiracy theory that there were more voters or more votes than voters in precincts around Salt Lake County. And so that's one of the reasons why he was convinced that the 2020 election was stolen. Because there are areas where more votes are recorded than voters, but he didn't have the entire voter file. Now, he has tried to get a hold of it many, many times. Even when he was in the legislature, he tried to leverage his official title to gain access to these. It seemed pretty clear that he was going to turn this information over to some national groups who were election conspiracy groups, election denial groups. But he's tried to get a hold of this information, but he couldn't because people have marked their voter information as private. There are a couple of bills in the legislature right now, and what they're going to do is they're going to make it so that everybody's information is going to be public, and then you have to go into the county clerk and explain why it should be private, and you have to be like a highly impacted group, public officials, police officers, things like that. There's also a third classification called withheld, and that is voter information that cannot be disclosed for any reason whatsoever, and that's usually in domestic violence cases. But they're going to make everybody's voter information public. You'll get a new voter ID number, and they're saying that will help with some of the privacy concerns, but everybody's voter information is going to be public. You're not going to be able to redact it anymore. So I find that interesting. They're going to make everybody's voter information public, but public officials are going to redact their personal information on their financial disclosures. Sons of September on Instagram writes, what are the ID stipulations in the bill? It's going to tighten the standards of what they use. Photo ID is going to be the main ID that they accept. They want photo ID. Some non-photo tribal IDs will be acceptable as a fallback option. People who use documents for proof of residency, like you bring in your utility bill, paychecks, things like that, that will still be okay. But starting in 2029, you won't be able to do that anymore. It'll have to be a photo ID or a tribal ID. That's what the IDs will be acceptable when you are dropping off your ballot to vote. Anyway, so that's going to be the end of vote by mail in Utah if this bill passes. What do you think about that? Let me know in the chat, and we'll discuss this a little bit. But yeah, that's the end of voter ID. something happened up on the Hill today that I was pleasantly surprised by, and it really again, I was surprised that this happened, because a couple of bills that were inspired by conspiracy theories failed in the legislature today. Just straight up failed on their vote. The first one was HB 85. That was from Lisa Shepard in Provo. And this one basically said that international organizations had no authority here in Utah. Specifically, the World Economic Forum, the United Nations, and the World Health Organization. And this conspiracy theory is born out of something called the Great Reset, which is this, it came out of the pandemic, where people believe that this shadowy cabal of global elites are engineering disasters, pandemics, crises, to enslave humanity, to take away freedom and enslave humanity. And that is the genesis of this bill. That is the reason why those three organizations were targeted in this bill specifically. It got through a House committee. It passed in the House, just like last year. Last year it got through a House committee, it got through the House, but it died in the Senate without ever getting a vote. Today it came up in the Senate. They passed it on second reading, but on third reading, it failed by a 12-17 vote. So that's encouraging that this conspiracy prompted bill ended up dying. It's the second year they've tried to get this through. Now, I found it very interesting that when the bill came up for the final vote, and it was clear that it was dead in the Senate, Senate President Stuart Adams voted in favor. And to understand why he did that, you have to understand the politics. He has 3 Republican challengers this year. It is almost certain that he is going to a primary election, the first one he's ever had. And so now he can point to this bill as something he supported when some of the far-right groups start to ding the other candidates about it or bring it up. I truly believe this was all a political move by Adams to show that he's on their side, because he's got a tough re-election bid this year. And if you know anything about Davis County, and we'll get to that in a second, but if you know anything about Davis County is sort of the beating heart of the crazy part of the Utah Republican Party. Washington County is a close second, but Davis County is where the real far-right groups are. They've got Tina Horlocker up there. As I've written before, it looks like she's a sovereign citizen, along with some of the and other people who are running for office up there have supported that. And so that's where a lot of this, that's one of the reasons why President Adams, I believe, voted in favor of this bill. So that's the first bill that failed. The second bill that failed was from Senator Ron Winterton, and that's SB 23. And that one is 100% about chemtrails. And if you know what chemtrails are, you look up in the sky, you see airplanes flying, and they've got those contrails behind them. Now, because I am a person who has been in a room with a book before and has paid attention in science class, I know that that's condensation. But there is a large group of Americans who believe that those contrails coming out of the back of planes are chemicals. Chemicals designed to do whatever, maybe mind control, population control. And so Senator Ron Winterton sponsored this bill, SB 23, and it failed in a Senate committee today. But Winterton Uh, and I encourage you to go and listen to the testimony, because he really doesn't support his argument that this is happening. But he cites a gentleman by the name of Dane Wingington. And Dane Wingington is a kook. Dane Wingington is a chemtrail kook. He's got a website called geoengineeringwatch.org. And by the way, this SB 23 was banning aircraft from spraying chemicals to control the weather or reduce solar radiation because of global warming. But this Dane Wingington, he was on Tucker Carlson. I think Tucker Carlson brought him on last year, 2025. And it did not go well. Tucker Carlson was widely mocked for having this person who was just insane on there. In fact, an advisor to Ted Cruz, because of that, after that interview happened with Tucker Carlson, a guy named the name of Omri Sarin, who is an advisor to Senator Ted Cruz, he wrote on social media, "This ecosystem, podcast, message board, streams, this app is a schizophrenia machine aimed at disabling conservatives' ability to do basic cognitive mapping. The ultimate goal is epistemic nihilism. I can't tell what's true or false anymore, so to hell with it." Yeah, and apparently this gentleman has prompted legislation or a legislative proposal here in Utah. Lady of the Great Salt Lake says, does the bill say chemtrails instead of contrails? No, it does not say chemtrails, but it is chemtrails. And I know this for a fact because when he ran this bill last year, I asked him about it. Let me pull up my story because the quote is just quite great. But he ran this bill last year. And I reached out to him. I mean, the bill does not directly reference chemtrails. Last year's bill doesn't. This bill doesn't. But I asked him about it. And in a text message, I said, what are you trying to do? And he said to me, and the quote is, vapor trails are different from chemtrails, and that is what we are targeting. On days that you have blue skies, especially away from the cities, it is very evident what is going on. And if you listen to today's hearing, he is even more convinced. He says he has thousands of emails from people talking about these chemtrails or these planes that are spewing chemicals into the sky. And he apparently has taken a lot of pictures of it as well. And that was his evidence. It failed 4-2. Two of the Republicans on the committee voted against it. Winterton was a little bit surprised that the bill failed because he warned the members of the committee that they were going to get a bunch of emails. I'm sure that they did. But you had a woman from the Eagle Forum get up and testify and said that this is absolutely happening. These chemtrails are damaging our health. And then you had another woman who is adjacent to the Eagle Forum, Marianne Christensen. She's got a website. She's got an organization, and I'm going to put this in quotes, organization. But she's got an organization called Utah Legislative Watch. It's just her. If you go to their website, it's had a placeholder for like 4 years. But these are the people. These are the people who show up every single time to testify on this. It's the same people over and over and over again, and that's who your lawmakers are listening to. And then they write legislation based on it. You had legislation based on the Great Reset. Now, it doesn't say what this is, but it doesn't specifically mention the Great Reset, but that's what Lisa Shepard's bill did. It said that the international organizations do not have any authority in Utah, and when one of our elected officials, an executive officer, decides to take an action in response to a crisis, it cannot be based on solely something from one of these three organizations. But we had a bill about it. And then we had a bill about chemtrails. And it seems like the Senate is the one that is holding the line on this stuff. The House is all in on it. The House, they'll just push it through. I was pretty proud of my headline when I wrote this about Lisa Shepard's bill a couple of days ago. The Paranoid Style in American Politics, Utah edition. And if you've never read that book, if you ever want to try to understand why we are in this moment we are, that's one of the books that you should read. The Paranoid Style in American Politics. If you haven't read it, you should. The guy wrote it, I think, back in the 60s. But it is as relevant today as it was then. Comment from Instagram. Well, they are spraying the mosquitoes over the Great Salt Lake. Is that related? Because it sure makes me sick. I don't know. Probably. I mean, you've got people out there taking pictures of these planes. And like I said before, I paid attention in science class, so I understand that it's condensation. That's what that's what a contrail is. I almost said chemtrail. But this chemtrail theory has been around for years. I mean, it's been around for decades. It used to be that people thought it was mind control. Mind control chemicals or stuff to control the population. They just alter it and update it for today's world. But both of those bills failed, so that's a good thing. You should feel good about that. Anyway, if you have any questions, comments, please leave them in the chat. I want to hear from you tonight. We're going to be doing this for about another half an hour or so. Make sure I haven't missed anything. Ryan Hi-Fi on TikTok says QAnon hasn't died away yet. No, it's just changed. It's just changed. And I saw this comment on social media, and I wish I had the graphic in front of me, but there was a study showing which news sources conservatives and liberals trust. And obviously Fox News is big on the right. But it's not just Fox News. They don't look at or they don't follow news organizations like the Wall Street Journal, which is one of the most conservative publications out there. This person posited, and I bet he's right, most of the readers of that are Democrats. And the comment he made, which I thought was quite interesting, is he said that conservative audiences, what they want from their media is they want conspiracy theories and Trump worship. That's what they want. And I think that that's true. They want conspiracy theories. I saw a very prominent Republican, a pretty wealthy Republican here in Utah, posting on X saying that if there was a conservative news outlet in Utah, would people support it? No, conservatives would not support that. They wouldn't read it. It wouldn't be giving them what they want unless you do something like the Post-Millennial, which is a trash publication, or Gateway Pundit, or anything like that. And they've already got Fox News. So anyway. Noel asks, has anything happened with HB 174? That is the bill from Representative Rex Schipp that prohibits providing hormone therapy and puberty blockers to minors. That bill has passed all the way through the House of Representatives. They are waiting for it to be introduced into the Senate. In fact, it had final passage on the House today. 15-5 was the final vote. All of the Democrats and I believe maybe Leah Hansen, brand new representative, was the only Republican who voted against that. Yeah. I believe she was the only no vote from the GOP. Oh, Norm Thurston was there as well. I'm looking at this through. Norm Thurston was another one who voted no. And I think those are the only Republicans. There were 6 who did not vote. One of them was Ashley Matthews, Democrat. This says HB 174, minors or anyone on Medicaid. This is completely banning hormone therapy for minors after a certain date, and the date that would go into effect is on May 6, 2026. But it says they would have to discontinue treatment before January 28th, 2027. That is, any minor will no longer be able to get hormone therapy. Hormonal transgender treatment is what the bill says. So that's where that piece of legislation is. Lady of the Lake, she asks a great question. This is a great question. We're going to get into the weeds here of how the legislature operates, because you got to pay attention to this. The substitution process for bills. She says HB 60 has a substitute, but last year they had a sub for the anti-union bill, yet we ended up with the original bill last minute anyway. Yes, lawmakers can substitute any bill at any time. And a lot of the times they will do this strategically. And let's go back to the first time that they ran the bill banning transgender care for minors. And this is going to upset you because this is how the process works. So this bill, as it is going through the process, it sets a date as it's going all the way through the process. House committee hearing. It started in the Senate because it was Senator Mike Kennedy, who is now in the U.S. Congress. And so this bill, Senator Kennedy, at the time, Senator Kennedy, swore up and down. He said, we're going to put a pause on these puberty blockers, hormone therapy for transgender youth, transgender minors, after a certain date, and I believe it was in May. They wanted to give time for those who were in treatment. There wouldn't be allowed any new patients after this date. So that's what the bill looked like as it goes through the Senate committee. They have to vote on it twice on the Senate floor. So that's what the bill looks like as it goes through the Senate vote once, Senate vote twice, goes over to the House. Goes to the House committee. Again, we have this date in May to cut off new patients for transgender or gender affirming care for youth who may be transgender. House committee goes through it like that. It comes to the floor for a vote. Okay, this is almost the final vote. As it comes to the floor for a vote, Representative Katie Hall, who is the House sponsor, and I was there. Kennedy was standing right behind her. She was a freshman in the House. Probably this was her second week in office. He's standing right there behind her, and she introduces a substitute. Now, the substitute is online, but it had only been online for maybe 20 minutes before they do this, so you don't get any time to look at it. But the substitute goes online, and it has an immediate effective date, meaning that they're taking away that ramp-up time, that grace period until May to cut off treatment. It would be immediate when the governor signed it. They sub that in on the House floor. It goes over to the Senate for a concurring vote. Boom, it's done. No debate on that provision. None. Absolutely no debate on that. People only knew it was coming 20 minutes before, and that's maybe because they looked at the substitute online. That's how that works. They can substitute these bills anytime. And they have to do a sub if amendments can only be a certain length, and then if the amendment gets to be too complicated, they have to substitute the entire bill. But they can sub it in at any time. Usually it comes in, it will be done on the floors when there's like a problem or something they need to fix. But with that bill, the first time they were banning gender affirming care here in Utah, they waited until the last possible second to put that immediate effective date in. Shady as you know what. But that's how they can operate, because they are a super majority and they can do whatever they want. Lady of the Great Salt Lake says, does the substitute have to go back to approval for both chambers? It seems like they move so fast. If a bill passes through one body and then it's changed in the other body, it has to come back to the original body for a concurring vote. It's just one vote. There's no hearing. They'll have a little bit of debate on the floor, but that's it. But that's how it works. And things are moving so fast with a 45-day session that you see these substitutes pop up and, nobody really knows what they do. Comment from Instagram says HB 174 is the ban on hormone treatment for minors. HB 193 is the Medicaid/Medicare funds for all affirming care. So thank you for pointing that out. Derek Kitchen says, will the new justices be confirmed before the candidate filing on March 8th? And Derek Kitchen, former state senator, he is running for Congress in the newly created 1st Congressional District. Thank you for joining the show tonight. As we talked about last time, I don't think that there's time. I don't think that there's time to do that, because, as you know, the filing date for your race comes up on March 9th. And unless the legislature moves the filing dates again in order to give themselves more time to put these justices in place, that's the only way that they would be able to do it, because they would need to get nominees from the Judicial Nominating Commission. They would need to have a public comment period. They would need to go through a Senate confirmation hearing, and then they would need to confirm them in the Senate and put them in place. And I just don't think that there's enough time right now. Now, if they decide to move the primary back and then move the filing dates back, then all bets are off. And as I pointed out before, our primary used to be in September. It's in June right now, but we used to have the primary election back in September. So they could move that. So there's your update on that. Kathy on Instagram says, can the Constitutional Court bill be repealed? Not by a referendum. The only way that you would be able to, the only way that it would be able to be repealed is by the legislature. That's it. It got 2/3 in both the House and the Senate, or it's on its way. I'll have to check the status on that. Let me look at that real quick. Trying to type. That bill is HB 392, and it just passed through a Senate committee today. So it'll be going to the Senate floor. I suspect that they will probably pass it probably in the next week or so. It doesn't have an immediate effective date. It doesn't go into effect. It doesn't really impact any cases until 2027. So there's not as much of a rush to pass this one as there was for the Supreme Court justices. Now, that's probably why people are worried that they're going to get these new Supreme Court justices in place in time to hear the Prop 4 appeal at the Utah Supreme Court, because why else would they have an immediate effective date unless they are planning on somehow moving the election dates again? And by the way, the lawsuit, we talked about this in our last show on Tuesday, the lawsuit from Representative Burgess Owens and Representative Celeste Malloy challenging that new congressional map. It has the court, and this is in a federal court. This is not the state court. This is a completely different lawsuit. This is in federal court. The judges there in the Utah circuit have agreed to hear it on an expedited basis. So that's where we are with this. Suzanne Daly on YouTube says, what do you know about American Promise passing in the 28th Amendment that will override Citizens United? Good luck, because you would need to get that amendment through Congress, and then it has to be ratified by the states. And I don't know how many states would get on board with that, or if they would have enough votes in Congress. So that's what you would need to do. I know they want to, and I think it should. I think that Citizens United has been an absolute disaster for our political system. It was probably one of the most egregious things that the Supreme Court has gotten wrong in a long list of egregious things. But I don't think that they're going to be able to do that.